As you know, throughout the summer, we have been living in the book of Genesis. And you remember the first three words of Genesis are what? In the beginning. The next words say this: when nothing existed but chaos. That's how far back chaos goes. Chaos is nothing new. We live in tension. We still live in tension today. And we have had a look at how some of our forefathers and foremothers have lived in tension as well. Remember Abraham. God told Abraham that he was going to be the father of a great nation. The problem was his wife was barren. So he went to one of his maids and had a son. And then God opened the possibility for his wife, Sarah, to have a son as well, Isaac. So we had these two boys from two different women, and guess what? It caused some chaos. It caused some difficulty. So Isaac goes on, and he has two kids. And they have twins. Rebecca has twins. His wife, Rebecca, has twins. And one is the favorite of Jacob. The one is the favor of Rebecca. Do you think that caused some difficulty? I would say so. There was all kinds of tensions. And in the midst of that, Jacob, we start to see the tension in his own life. He eventually, his wife has twins, and there's tension there as well. So today, we see the tension that Jacob has had. We've seen how he's wrestled with God, how he's had all kinds of difficulties. And now we come today where Jacob has, at this point in the scripture, 11 boys. He has 12 children, and don't like it. It's not the way it is today, but there's not much mention of his daughter. There's a daughter named Dinah. 6 of his sons come from Leah, and remember, he really didn't like Leah that much. He had to marry Leah. And then 4 boys come from his maidens. You know, this is different from nowadays. You don't have 12 children with 4 different women. Most places. But, so now there's 11 boys. And Rachel, the one who he really, really loved, the woman who was his sweetheart. She had a boy named Joseph. She'll eventually have a boy named Benjamin as well, but we're not there yet. But meanwhile, Jacob had settled in the land where his father lived, in the land of Canaan. And this is the story of Jacob. The story continues with Joseph, this 11th child. Joseph was 17 years old at the time, helping out his brothers in herding the flocks. There was his half-brothers, actually, the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. And Joseph brought his father bad reports on them. He was a snitch. I bet the boys really loved that, didn't they? Did you ever have a sibling that was a tattletale? Yeah. We don't like that a whole lot, did we? Israel, which meaning Jacob, loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he was a child in old age. And he made him an elaborate embroidered coat. Remember Andrew Lloyd Webber? The play? Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat? I'll admit you today, I did that play with some of the children in another church I served, and I played the role of Pharaoh, and that's another story for another day. When his brothers realized that his father loved him more than them, they grew to hate him. They wouldn't even speak to him. Now his brothers had gone off to Shechem where they were pasturing their father's flocks. In Israel, Jacob said to Joseph, "Your brothers are with flocks in Shechem. Come, I want you to send you to them." He said, "Go and see how your brothers in the flocks are doing, and bring me back a report." What a snitch. Bring me back a report. He sent him off from the valley of Hebron to Shechem. A man met him as he was wandering through the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" "I'm trying to find my brothers. Do you have any idea where they are grazing their flocks?" The man said, "They've left here, but I overheard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph took off, tracked his brothers down, and found them in Dothan. They spotted him off in the distance. By the time he got to them, they had cooked up a plot to kill him. The brothers were saying, "Here comes that dreamer." Now, we skipped a part about dreams that I'll tell about. Joseph had 2 dreams that he shared with his brothers. In one dream, he dreamed that he was a stalk of wheat, a sheaf of wheat, and he was in the middle of a circle of sheaves that were representing his brothers, and all those sheaves were bowing down before him. Now try that out in the family. I'm here today to have you worship me. That wouldn't go over real well, would it? And he tells some other story about how he is surrounded by stars and the sun and the moon, and everybody's worshiping him. That kid had an interesting imagination, and he was quite a dreamer. So they said, "Let's kill him and throw him into one of the old cisterns. We can say that a vicious animal ate him, and we'll see how his dreams go then." Reuben, who was the oldest, heard the brothers talking and intervened to save him. "We're not going to kill him. No murder. Go ahead and throw him into the cistern out there in the wild, but don't hurt him." Reuben planned to go back later and get him out and take him back to his father. When Joseph reached his brothers, they ripped off his fancy coat he was wearing and grabbed him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was dry. There wasn't any water in it. Then they sat down to eat supper. Looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites on their way to Gilead, their camels loaded with spices and ointments and perfumes to sell in Egypt. Judah said, "Brothers, what are we going to get out of killing our brother and concealing the evidence? Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites, but let's not kill him. He is, after all, our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. By the time the Midianites traders were passing by him, his brothers pulled Joseph out of the cistern and sold him for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took Joseph down to Egypt. Well, they took care of that dreamer, didn't they? We sometimes do mean things to our dreamers as well. Imagine Dr. King. He stood in front of the Lincoln Memorial and said he had a dream. And at the time, the people who were around there were inspired by that dream. There were people at home sitting and watching it on television saying, "We got to get this guy. His dreams are going to cause us nothing but difficulty." They say that on the day of the I Have a Dream sermon, that what happened next was the FBI began a file on Dr. King. And as you know, he wasn't perfect. But he had a dream that would have made a difference. And we're still trying to hope that that dream comes true. Jesus Christ was a dreamer. He had a vision that all people could live together in grace and in love. And the powers that be, that threatened them entirely too much. And they had to get rid of him. The boys did not like their brother because he was a dreamer. In a way, he was kind of irritating. He was a tattletale. And they wanted to do something about that. So they found a way. At first, some of the boys just wanted him to flat out be killed. But at least they came up with a scheme of how he was taken as a prisoner to Egypt. Because they sold him out. Because they sold him out. See, dreamers disrupt things. And most of us, we don't like the inconvenience of disruption. These 11 boys, these 11 brothers, show us much about how we today, who call ourselves sisters and brothers, can still be so difficult with each other. My Lord, when we talk about chaos, we call ourselves the church, the general church, the worldwide church, and so often we find ourselves in chaos, arguing over who's in and who's out, and who's going to threaten us if they're in. And we make a mess out of things. We live in chaos. These boys, like so many of us, were jealous. They were jealous of the favor that their brother had. They were jealous of his coat. They were jealous of his dreams that they thought were outlandish. They were jealous. There's a lot of jealousy in the world today. Most of the jealousy is about how we want things to be fair, and we want them to be fair in our direction. We want them to be fair sometime at the expense of someone else, and how jealousy destroys relationships. How jealousy brings about disharmony. You know, you probably don't need to have me tell you this morning, but get a load of this. Life is not fair. Sometimes it's just flat out not fair. But I ask you a question this morning. Really, maybe this is your homework this week. To ask the question, has God been fair with you? Has God been fair with you? I probably have shared with you before that I have 2 brothers. I don't have 11 brothers. I got 2. And we have worked out a lot. But there was a time that there was tremendous jealousy on my part. I'm going to admit that to you. You probably know my brother that's 2 years younger than me was just one of these people that everything in life worked his way. And he ended up being the publisher of a large metropolitan newspaper. And he did really well financially, very well financially. But he was publisher of this newspaper, and sometimes the newspaper wrote things that some people didn't like. My brother had threats on his life. He had to have security at his home. His daughters had to be escorted to school. It's a pretty high price to pay for what the world would call success. I have a little brother, kind of like, and his name is Joseph. And he's the young one. And I'll tell you, I'm over it, but my dad just worshiped the ground on my brother, who was a newspaper publisher. My mother loved this little boy that she had later in life. Joseph, my brother Joe, is a macromolecular engineer. Don't even ask. But he's the president of a company that makes building materials that are used in buildings all over the world. Pretty impressive, huh? He also has been blessed financially. Joe lives a good part of his life in airports, going from place to place to place. In fact, he'll sit in an airport and he's got a son, he has a daughter, and he'll sing a song. You might know that song, The Cat's in the Cradle. He actually sings that song when he's in the airport, because the song ends up where this man's children's life has gone past him. And Joe's got 2 good kids, but it probably has more to do with his wife, Lisa. And see, the thing is the world would say the 2 of them are blessed. You know who they tell you which brother is blessed? I double-checked with John this week. I talked to him. They both say, I'm much more blessed than they are. Jesus tells us that for all of us, there's going to be mansions. And my brothers already have mansions. I have a condominium and I'm doing just fine. As long as I paid a fee for somebody to cut my grass, I live a blessed life. I live a blessed life because I get to do this. And I get to be with you. As you probably can tell, I've grown out of jealousy. But I can't say I didn't live there at the time. And I see what it did to me. And see, jealousy so quickly goes to hate. Hate is not used that often in the Bible. But the word today is hate. These brothers were so tired of this dreamer, so tired of this kid that seemed to be blessed, and they weren't blessed, had a coat that they didn't have, that they feared who he was, so they hated him. Their struggle was that they felt if he was privileged, they were losing some privilege. And oh, help us all when we think somebody's taken away our privilege. And then we don't share. And then we don't share. Remember in Genesis, we already heard the power of welcoming strangers. Not to look at them as threats that's going to take something from us. But the scriptures say in Hebrews that when we welcome strangers at times, we might be actually entertaining angels, entertaining God himself. Hate has done a lot to us. Hate that is born in jealousy. Hate that is so protective that we destroy the lives of others. And finally, these boys who were so jealous and hateful of their brother, what they did was they went on to profit at his expense. To profit at his expense. The brothers valued 20 pieces of silver for commodities to sell their brother. They valued that more than they did brotherhood itself. How do we value profit at the expense of others? What do we do with all that? Now, I know some scriptures tell us that we should just sell everything and give it to the poor. It's harder work than that. It's harder work than that. Our missions committee has worked hard in everything that we do in order to make sure that what we do isn't just causing someone to continue to to take without becoming empowered. That's the tough part. How do we give? How do we empower others to become reliant themselves? That takes a lot of work. Jealousy, hatred, putting ourselves ahead of the needs of others. That keeps us in chaos. The chaos that God saw at the very beginning of time. I think he looks down now and still sees chaos today. And the world looks for people like you and like me to try to break through that chaos with love instead of jealousy, grace instead of hate, and looking for ways that we can empower our brothers and sisters in this world today.